I was the first Negro child. We were Negroes back then, and adopted by a Caucasian family in the state of Indiana. Jim and Marceline went to Suman Coleman Orphanage, and they actually went to adopted a Caucasian child, and they ended up adopting me. The story goes that I was crying real loud, and it drew attention for Marceline to come over. And once she picked me up, I stopped crying, and that's how I was adopted.
One of the things that was talked about a lot was the idea of the rainbow family. What was that?
Well, when you think about a rainbow family and the Rainbow Coalition, and I'm thinking back of an article that I saw in Brazil. It was the Rainbow Family. That's the first time I ever saw that, in 1963. And it had a picture of our family. And I think, and reading that article, and I have had it interpreted because it was in Portuguese, it talked about Jim Jones's rainbow family, because we had an African American, we had an American Indian, we had two American Asian from the American Korean conflict, and we had his natural son, homemade, which was Welsh, British, or kind of a Caucasian mongrel.
And that was kind of the term was used over and over again in the church, rainbow family. What did they mean?
Well, I think that what the term rainbow family meant, to me, was it was a true spectrum of races, beliefs, backgrounds. So when the term rainbow family really was used in People's Temple, it was more of an inclusive term, that People's Temple, and more specifically Jim Jones's family, showed a good spectrum of diversity. And I felt growing up, I mean, again, I've heard this from the time I could talk, that's what People's Temple was about. Inclusiveness.
So the rainbow family, your family was kind of used as this kind of poster family for the ideals of the church. Would that be?
My family was a template. My family was a template of the rainbow family. You could look at Jim Jones's family and see all the different aspects of the world. The black, white, Asian. I mean, that doesn't get any more exclusive. A anecdotal story of that is my biological grandmother. Shortly after I was adopted, she didn't know where I was adopted to. Jim Jones had a community meeting with Trinity Spiritual Church in Indianapolis, and my grandmother told me this recently, that when she saw that he had a black child and he was preaching to his black audience, she felt that this person was truly a person who said what he meant and meant what he said, because he wasn't talking about integration and being inclusive to all people in God's teachings. He really lived it.
We went to, I've been to Indianapolis thousands of times because my mother's from there. And we went to Lynn, where Jim Jones is from. And it is not diverse at all. And I wonder if you had any idea of why this diversity, why this integration was so important to Jim Jones.
Well, let me give you the family story, or let me give you the story that Jim Jones gave me. And don't know how to verify this, but it was just a father-son conversation. Because I've asked him that question as a young man. Why did he become what he is and what he was at that time? And he told me that when he was a young man, there was two sides of the railroad tracks. And one side was Caucasian, economically deprived Caucasian, and the other side was economically deprived blacks. He lived on the economically deprived Caucasian side, but his best friend as a young man was a black kid. And at one time, they were walking down the street or walking down the rural road, because I don't think they even had real streets, and his black friend was going to be harassed or be beat up. And he intervened with that. And he just could understand why people treat him differently. I honestly believe, and people have told me different reasons, why Jim Jones gave me his name, Jim Jones Jr. I always felt, and truly felt this, that it was a sense of him giving something back to the black community. And by showing the world and showing everyone that even before his own son, biological son, he gave his black son his name. What does that story represent, and how does that bring him to the concept of being so much for integration? Well, there's different impact and different little sentinel events in my life that have left impressions that still carry with me today. And I like to believe, and the story I was told was this was his first embracement to the African American culture. I think more importantly is when you look at the time and date stamp that People's Temple and Jim Jones started his movement, the underprivileged, the deprived, the person who was always locked out was the African American person. And maybe some people might say it was a contrived plan, or maybe it was just the times that Jim saw that the African American needed someone to step in. The one thing I do know about him is that he may have been Caucasian, but he talked black. He really did talk black. He understood the black strife. I mean, I felt it as a son. And I had challenges looking at a person who was Caucasian, who understood what how black people suffered. Again, I mean, the worst thing you could be in America than black is a poor white person, because you have no help there.
When they go to beat up his friend and he intervenes, what do you think that meant for him for the rest of his life?
Well, what it meant for him was a physical a deformity, because a knife cut his tendon, and he always reminded us of that. I think what I feel what it meant to him is a moment or a sentinel event that was some of his calling, some of his mission. A person didn't do as much as he did for the African American community and not believe it. I mean, historic. He was going to become the pastor at the Methodist Church, and would not do it until it was integrated, and left the opportunity. He integrated Methodist Hospital, would not go in and get his appendix removed when it was ruptured until it was integrated. You don't do those testimonials just for reasons to propel you in statue. You do it because you actually believe.
I just was kind of searching for this an ending. So
the ending is, I'm Jim Jones Jr. That's the ending. I mean, not Stephen Jones, his biological son. The legacy of Jim Jones, in his name, is given to his black son. That's the ending. Maybe that's the story. Maybe that's the story where he gave his name, which is very important to people, to his black son, and not to his biological. So it's full circle. Jim Jones's legacy goes to a black person. Maybe that's the ending.
About him, I think about him building a black congregation, that it, some people say, or it could have been a contrived plan. What do you mean by that?
I love hearing this. I love hearing the argument about Jim Jones came to manipulate the black audience, the black populace of Indianapolis, of San Francisco, of L.A., Seattle, wherever the other churches were. Excuse me, and I've even been told that the only reason why he gave you his name is because you were a black and you were going to be the goat. The symbolism of the goat who led other sheep in to the organization. And in retrospect, people can say anything they want to say, but here's the chain of events. Okay, when I was adopted, they did not go in to adopt a black child. They came in to adopt a Caucasian girl. All right, the story of me crying and Marceline coming to comfort me, there was a connection made. Have adoptions been made on weaker terms? Yes. Actually, Marceline's parents discouraged them on adopting a black child because they thought they would take attention from their biological son who was just born a year before me. Jim wanted to have a black child in the family. He gave me his name. It could instead of Indiana, you could have your biological name could have been stayed with you, or your birth name. That's one. Two, and this is a story that only I know about. And I was kicked out of school in 6th grade, and for a teacher who made a racial remark, and I responded to it. Probably inappropriately, and I would probably not allow my son to do the same way I responded to it. Jim Jones came up to the school and said, and spoke a few expletives, but really ripped that teacher and the school apart for talking to his son that way, who happened to be black. This is my father defending me, by the father defending his son on for a racial matter, but the point is he was defending his son. So when people say that he was contrite and he was trying to organize a whole manipulation of the black culture, I didn't see it. I saw him as a father who cared for his son who happened to be black. He used to tell me, his nose was wide. He used to try and make me feel as if I was a part of the family and facial features. Now, his nose wasn't that wide. He was a Welsh boy, okay? It doesn't get much pointier. But the whole point that I tell you this little kind of jokingly anecdotal stories is that I honestly feel that Jim Jones cared about the African-American culture, the African-American race. Now, was it an opportunity for him? The opportunity to fight for civil rights doesn't come. It's chosen. I mean, he could have been graduated from Quaker, right? Got his education there. I mean, he could have went the nice Methodist route and been very successful that way too. But when you look at the loss of Martin, loss of Malcolm, loss of John, loss of Bobby, you look at the void in African-American leadership, or leadership that was not African-American, that was but focused on civil rights. It's an opportunity. We all have the opportunity, but the responsibility, and he took the responsibility to do that, and he did it. I mean, no one ever complains about what Jim Jones did until it comes to Jonestown.
Jim Jones claimed to be Native American, have Native American blood. He claimed to have African American blood. At different times. And I think you know as his son. What race was Jim Jones?
Jim Jones was Welsh, and I think he had some Cherokee background, Native American background, somewhere in the pipeline there. Was he African American? No. Was he Caucasian? Yes. And all of us got a little bit Indian in this. When I was about 9, 10 years old, I went to the bathroom. I kind of snuck out of class. I was River Valley Elementary School. Snuck out of class and went to the bathroom, and I saw a graffiti word on the bathroom wall. And right or wrong, at that age, I knew the four-letter words. And so I sat there, I looked at the word, and I phonetically sounded it out. Nigger. 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 Okay. So now I go back to the class, and I say it. No one responds. Say it again. No one responds. So shortly later, I'm getting on the school bus, and I start singing the Mickey Mouse tune, but using the word nigger. N-I-G-G-G-R, nigger. And by humor and by people's desire, they start singing it with me. N-I-G-G-G-R, nigger. And the bus driver, Mr. Pruitt, strange how you remember your school bus driver's name, he turns to me and says, Jim, Mr. Jones, rather, should you be saying that word? And I turn to him and say, it's not a four-letter word. I get off the school bus, and everybody's yelling at me, bye, nigger, bye. I'm waving bye back to him. I'm skipping down the driveway, singing a song, N-I-G-G-G-R, nigger. I come into the house, N-I-G-G-G-R, bam! Jim Jones knocks me off my feet. Now, I have IQ about 142, and so when he looks at me and says, what did you say? I get up, and I respond to him, nigger, bam! He goes, he's standing over me now. What did you say? And I get up again, bam! Now again, a high IQ and application could be two different things. But it's amazing what the power of a punch does. So that by the fourth punch of me laying on the floor and me looking up at him and responding to him, I finally got it, and I asked him a question. Or better yet, I said a word I saw on the bathroom wall. It was at that moment and that time in my life that my father took the time to explain to me what's really important. He took the time to explain to me what the challenges of the African-American person was, what the challenges the African-American person faced, and more importantly, that I was African-American. I live to those tools and lessons today. The move to California was really fun. There were about 12, 15 cars. And it was probably the first bus trip that we had. But it was only in cars. You know, we had the bus trips that went across the United States every summer. But the Cordell family, the Cobb family, I remember my friends, and there was other people driving across the United States and, you know, making that sojourner journey to a place none of us knew, you know, none of us could even imagine. But being 4 or 5 years old, I just remember that we were going to someplace. We were going to California. We were going to a beautiful place. And California was beautiful when we were. I remember us all stopping at the bottom of East Road when we first got there. And it's dusty and tired coming off Highway 20 and kind of looking at our new world.
What was Ukiah like? What was the racial?
Man, Ukiah, I was the only raisin in the cottage cheese. It was wide and wide. The people who were deprived there were the Indians who lived on the small little reservation. But at least there were a few of them. I remember real quickly. I remember a story, a life experience that, you know, when your parents have birthday parties for kids, no one would come to mine. My parents sent out little invitations to all the kids in class. No one would come to mine. I was the only black kid in class.
You guys, do you remember you had you guys had animals and farms?
Oh,
Which
yeah.
seemed like kind of a constant with the temple. What was that?
My father loved to have animals. I think that was from his childhood to where his best friends were animals because he had no one else to play with. Yeah, we had a lot of chickens and chicken dogs. Um, we had 13 dogs and I think 14 or 15 cats. And for Christmas, you could in our family you could only have a $25 limit. And my job was to feed the cats and dogs. So I remember, I'm like, God, I forget what Christmases was, but I asked for a can opener, electric can opener. So, but it was a great. I had the best childhood. I mean, I lived in a community that it was racially undiverse, but I had a sense of community, of family. Man, my brother Stephen was out saving pollywogs or tadpoles before, because the river bed would dry up. I rode horses every Saturday morning. So, talk about a good, nurturing family to grow up in. I don't know. I still wish I could give that to my boys now.
Um, your father seemed to be someone who was kind of bigger than life. Just this outsized individual. How did you deal with that? How do you think that affected you?
You know what I used to do to my father? Yeah, he supersized it. He was always, he could always capture a room, capture an audience. God, I used to sit there and just watch him. I mean, to talk about orator. Yeah, he can move a crowd. I used to stand behind him when he talked to people, stand right over his shoulder. Because I wanted to grow up to be like him. I wanted to be able to capture an audience, capture a crowd, talk to people and have empathy, and at the same time make a point. Because by doing that, he motivated people. People were important.
What do you mean people were important?
I honestly feel that the Jim Jones people were important to him. He always listened. There's a phrase that he gave me. First time I heard it was from him. I've heard it since from other people. Is if you understand someone's story, you understand that person. And another truism that I live to today. I try to understand people's story. Because then I can understand what perspective they're coming from. Now, with Jim Jones, that could have been, people could have said that he did that so he could find out how he could manipulate them. But I think that came later.
I think you said at one point was that your father taught you not to respect emotion. You remember saying that? What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
He used to say, my father used to tell me that people's lives, 60% of people's lives were made, 60 to 80 actually, were made on emotional decisions. And if you want to have a directed life, you need to change that paradigm. Make your decisions, 60% of your decisions based on logic, fact, and reason. And allow emotion to be the secondary motivator. And we were Star Trek fans. He and I were Star Trek fans. And he used to always say, just vulcanize yourself. Just vulcanize yourself. And I don't know if that's healthy or unhealthy. As my wife would say, it's probably unhealthy, because I know that's every typical husband's response. But I think that's what he used to always, we talked about that a lot. Talked about that a lot, about how people let their lives be based on emotions and not on logic and reason.
What was the relationship like between Jim Jones and Marceline?
The relationship between Jim and Marceline as a young child I thought was perfectly normal and happy. I later discovered in life that that was a great facade. I think Jim Jones was emotionally unavailable to her, physically unavailable to her, and mentally abusive to her. When you take family vacations, and the first week you're with, Jim and one of his mistresses, and the boys are with him. The second week you're with Jim and another mistress, and the boys are with him. And the third week your mother comes. That's pretty dysfunctional. I used to really distrust and dislike the mistresses because I felt they were tearing our family apart. Now, I was told and was preached to that my father had to please these people and they emotionally needed him, but that deep down in your heart, you know what's wrong. And looking back at it now, and maybe I see it a little more clearly, and I've been told this, Marcy wanted to leave Jim back in early 70s. She actually had found someone that she was emotionally available to her. And that almost happened. I never met him, never knew him. But I really appreciate my mother sticking around for us.
Why didn't she leave him?
Well, what I was told from her parents that he said that he told her if she left, she would never see the kids. And I think, and I was also told that he threatened her physically also, that she would not see a day if she left him. So, when you hear all this after you're grown and you hear this about your parents, you kind of look back and you go, oh, that's what happened in that moment in your life, or that's why Dad wasn't available on that day. Maybe that's why Mom was crying in the bedroom that afternoon.
Excuse me. At what point did it the dysfunctionality, did it kind of grow with time? Or?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, gosh. Well, the family was dysfunctional. But when you live in a dysfunctional family, you think it's normal. So, you're asking me now, and as a historian, to look at this and go, how bad was the dysfunction? Well, when you live in it, you don't realize it. When your mother leaves on Monday morning to go work in Santa Rosa and lives in an apartment in Santa Rosa because she was a California State Health Hospital inspector, and your nanny, takes care of you all week, and your father is in and out for meetings, what have you, you just thought that was normal. But that was when we were older. As a young child, I remember my mother and father coming together for the, open houses at school, sitting in the back of the auditorium when you were in a class play. I remember when I played Santa Claus, and how they both sat in the front row then because they couldn't believe that the school was going to allow the black kid to be Santa Claus. But so those are good things. But the one thing that they did have in our house is a sense that family was important. If your name was Jones, you were the most important thing in the world. I still carry that.
It's interesting because you're saying that on one hand, the family was really important. That was, and that there's no doubt about it. The family was really important to your father and your mother. But on the other hand, it was dysfunctional.
I think in everything that I tell you about Jim Jones, there's going to be a paradoxical thought. And you have to accept that before you can really understand Jim Jones. You talk about say what you mean what you say. That didn't apply to Jim Jones. The perception of our family unity was important. And thus, that perception, you had to have that ingrained, that to be a Jones meant that you were someone special. Not just to be a part of the family, but you were a Jones. Then his actions had something different. You know, having mistresses, not being emotionally available to the family. But, so again, that's a paradoxical thought, you know, paradoxical practice that he applied to probably almost everything. I think that's a good way to put it.
It's so interesting because it just seems like in so many ways, your family was like this microcosm of the church as a whole. You know that.
You're right. You're right. I think that's a really good point and a good concept to think about as our family. The paradoxical application of being important because you were a Jones, but living in dysfunction. The same paradoxical thought of having this vision to change the world, but having this whole undercurrent of dysfunction and manipulation and trickeration that was underneath that vision. I think I really think that's a very good way to look at it, that our family being a microcosm of a church, because you had the same dynamics going on. You had the challenge between the brothers, the biological versus the son with the name. You had the challenge of the intelligent, brilliant older child who wanted to really break away from the family and eventually did. You had the challenge of the new person coming into the family, so he would be the new recruit into the temple and always trying to prove himself, but also having a basis of understanding of outside this family and not really buying in. So I think that's a very good thought in the concept that our family represented the kind of fractions and issues of People's Temple.
I guess the question would be, you know, what was your father's gift?
I think one, my father had the unique ability to motivate people. He had the unique ability to assess them for what they were trying to accomplish in their life. May have been the religious aspect of people, may have been the political aspect of people, or may have been the sense of belonging, or even the person who felt like they wanted to be leaders. He had the unique ability to assess those needs and weave them together for a common goal. Now, the question is, what was a common goal? I honestly believe that People's Temple created a world of no isms. No racism, sexism, ageism. I think what is, you know, there's a few other isms. In People's Temple, we didn't have that. You know, when you talk about the Acts of Apostle, we came together, sold our possessions, lived in common. That was really the template of People's Temple. Now, a lot of people have said, and I've heard more recently, that was all trickery and manipulation. He had money in bank accounts. He did not. I didn't see it. You know, if I wanted to have an allowance, I had to do the same person as the guy living in the commune 2 miles down the road. Did I mind? No, because I was a part of that community. I really believed in that my purpose in this family, especially because I was a Jones, was to set an example that I could do the same thing that my fellow comrade who was the same age. You know? So that was one of his unique abilities. His other unique ability was, and we talked a little bit about, is to take the Black voice and give it articulation. And we talked about that. We talked about that earlier. then I think his other unique ability is that he was passionate. And that's unique. He really believed in what he was doing. Now the question would be, what was he doing? Well, okay.
I know what he's doing. I mean, it seems to me that I totally agree with you. I mean, I think nobody would fight this. That the purpose wasn't about luxury, and wasn't about money. You know, what money can get you.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to me, you know, and just think about it, that it was a lot about power.
Yes. Jim's need for power, his drive to make a statement in the world was, in retrospect, I think, an overwhelming drive. At the time, I didn't see it. Now, I see this retrospectively as I grow older and understand certain drivers that people have. He wanted to leave a statement on the world. The statement that he left is not probably the one that he desired. But you know something, though? I want to ask myself, and I want to ask anyone else, don't we all want to leave a statement? Don't we all want to have an epitaph on a gravestone, more than a beloved father, beloved brother, beloved sister, a beloved son? Don't we want to make a statement? I mean, when we talk about living your life, and so it's not in vain, that's from the Bible, that's the teachings, that's the word.
I want to go back to something. When was the first time, as you were a teenager and a child through all this, when was the first time that you realized that your father had a mistress or mistresses? How did you find out that?
Well, how I found out that my father had mistresses, I was 12, 13 years old. We came down to San Francisco, or we were in a transition of moving down, and we went to visit a friend's house that we knew, the Moore family actually, and we were going to stay over, and Jim went in the room with Carolyn to sleep. And I was a little surprised. I'm wondering, why is he going in there? And the next day, he sat down at breakfast like it was a breakfast conversation, and explained that Carolyn cared for him, but she needed stability. And he explained it like as if he did it for her versus his personal needs. And I look at it retrospectively now and go, Dad, you were bullshitting me real good. But at the time, that's how I thought. I mean, I had great resentment to the mistresses, that they couldn't find their own husband or find their own significant other. And for many years, I went through life resenting them versus resenting him.
Okay, so who was Mr. Muggs?
Mr. Muggs was the chimpanzee that Jim Jones rescued from an animal experimental lab in Southern California. And that happened on the election of Richard Nixon on that day. And the reason why I know this is because on the way home, driving up Highway 99 from Southern California, in the middle of the state, we had this little bitty monkey with diapers on. And he was cute. It was a cute little baby monkey, and like a little baby. And my brother Steven, was real close to him and really loved him. I was mad because we were supposed to get an ocelot, and that's what I wanted. It's a small tiger that has real high affinity to be trained and domesticated. But we got Mr. Muggs because he was at higher risk to be experimented on. And I remember listening to the radio of President Nixon's election, and Mr. Muggs, me, Steven, and Mr. Muggs being in the back of the Vista Cruiser, and that chimpanzee shitting all over everything. So Let me tell you, I never liked Mr. Muggs. Okay, I think I was 8 years old, but Mr. Muggs became a real focal point of the organization because it was a representation of him rescuing someone or something from experimental, lab animal experimentation. And Mr. Muggs actually went to Guyana. One of the first groups of people who went to Guyana. Mr. Muggs went down there.
What was it like in San Francisco? You know, you guys moved to San Francisco in the '70s, middle '70s or so. You know, and you're now a teenager, and all these things are happening in San Francisco. You know, talk about can you a little bit? Do you remember those times in San Francisco? San Francisco was kind of the epicenter of change at that point.
When we came to San Francisco in the early '70s, there was a sense of excitement and real determination. The church was growing. We had done joint revival meetings with Methodist Baptist Church, Reverend Befford. We had worked with a couple other churches, African American churches, and there was a real sense of excitement that People's Temple was going to create their own church in San Francisco. Now, how it may be, we also stole a lot of members from the churches that we had done revival meetings, and that created a lot of chaos. But out of that chaos came a certain direction and political opportunism for Jim Jones. And I can remember many of the political people in San Francisco being very intimate with Jim Jones in the sense of them stopping by the church, meeting with him, us going to their house for dinner. And it was exciting times. It was exciting times. Jim Jones could mobilize people for protests. He could mobilize the vote. And I think what was exciting about that is that we were becoming a political mainstay in San Francisco. As a son, when you look at your father, and you know, again, he already supersized himself. But when you see him, you know, sitting down at the mayor's house, and you kind of sitting in the living room listening, because one thing that my father used to do a lot was take his sons with him to different meetings. And his logic around that was, this is an opportunity for us to learn about the organization, about him. Now, again, he had a lot of meetings without us, too, but what I saw was him becoming what I thought he was. I saw my father as a great visionary. You always see your father in the best light. But then I saw other people seeing him in the same light. And, you know, the fact how we mobilized people to get out the vote for George Moscone. How when they had testimonial dinner, how all the different senators and state assemblymen, mayors sat there in testimony for Jim Jones. This is your father, and everyone else in the world is saying he's a great person. I was excited. I was happy.
Was Jim Jones a caring father, out to change the world, out to change lives, or was he a manipulative user, corrupt, or was he both?
I think it goes back to the paradoxical thought. My perspective of Jim Jones was he's a caring father. A lot of things that I do with my children today, when I tuck them into bed, I tell them phenomenal bedtime stories about princes, and I use their names, or some of the things that my father did with me. Was he out to change the world in a positive direction? Well, I have to say yes, because that's what I want to do now. And he gave me that gift. You know, I want to wake up every day and have an impact positively in someone's life. Maybe that's why I'm in the profession I'm in. That's what he gave me. Was he a manipulator? Was he a user? I didn't see him that way. So I can't answer that question. When you're brought in to a family and given the gifts that I was given, and you know, I mean, look at the alternative of my life. You know what I mean? Let's just stop and start looking for the alternative. I'm an African American child thrown into an orphanage in 1960. Okay, we're a whole lot of people adopting black kids back then, bro. And so that would have led to a foster home. That would have led to potential, kind of a system child, ward of the court. 1960. So that meant, and I'm not trying to be negative or positive on this, trying to be real, is drug abuse potentially, illegal activities, that meant jail, or just death in the streets. And here I was on the other side, living a very productive life, getting one of the best educations in San Francisco at Drew High School. Man, I owed so much to Jim Jones and Marceline that I really believe, because I was an example of their testimony. So I saw him and Marceline as people who really cared and made a difference. You know why? They made a difference in my life.
What was the idea of revolutionary suicide?
Revolutionary suicide came from a trip that we took in 1976 to Cuba, where we went with Dr. Goodlett, Dr. Tipton, I think, and we met with Huey Newton. And Huey Newton was writing his book, Revolutionary Suicide. And if I'm paraphrasing this correctly, he talked about revolutionary suicide and believing in a cause enough to die for. And the best example that he gave was the Vietnam monk who would pour gasoline on themselves in protest of the imperialism or colonization that America was doing in Vietnam. But I think Huey said it the best, and again, you'll see this, you might be seeing a little thread of what my father took ends justifies the means from Malcolm, and now revolutionary suicide from Huey Newton. But he didn't complete the thought that Malcolm went with the ends changing from the means changing, and also the thought of Huey Newton was it's easy to die for a cause, which is revolutionary suicide, but it's hard to live with one. And to wake up every day, and I was 16 years old, and I understood this conversation. To wake up every day and live for a cause is a true testimony to a cause. To die for a cause is the easy way.
Let's go to Jonestown.
Okay.
Was there a heightened sense of paranoia in Jonestown?
I think it became that. I think the highest. Okay, hold on.
Okay. Paranoia.
The heightened sense of paranoia in Jonestown, I think, was created. I think originally, and I think my brother talks about it best of, there was a real sense of utopia, a sense of building a new world prior to my father coming down to Jonestown. And when my father came down to stay and the mass exodus from California, there was a heightened sense of paranoia. Some of that was real. I mean, paranoia can be healthy. There's nothing wrong with a little productive paranoia. I said, but when it became dysfunctional, and I think it became that way with my father very quickly, again, when you're isolated and he is the only sense of communication with the outside world, and his sense of paranoia was preached over and over every night on the radio, on the speaker system, I think there was a heightened sense of paranoia. But not much more than Redwood Valley or San Francisco. It was more intensified because it was localized.
What was this heightened? It was heightened by your father's drug use, and were you aware of your father's drug use?
A lot of people have asked me about my father's drug use, and I completely denied it for many years. Because I never had a reference point to know if he was on drugs or not on drugs. And it wasn't until years later that I was covering the ER and I saw a person come in on an overdose of amphetamines and heroin. and I saw his manifestation of what his clinical symptoms are, that I had deja vu and remembered seeing my father have that. So I don't know if it's heightened drug use. I know now as an adult and having a clinical background that his actions demonstrated that, but I could never verify that at the time.
I just want to go back before, from the early days, is your father kind of faking these strokes and heart attacks, or having these strokes and heart attacks? Do you remember any of that? Any stories of that?
When someone asked me about his drug use, there was a time, and again, I didn't know, but there was a time that my father used to shoot stuff in his arm. And he told all of his kids that this was medicine that he had because he had a bad condition. And I remember one time after he did that, he kind of fell out on the floor, went into convulsions and seizures, and he was taken to the hospital. And supposedly he had this heart attack. And again, I might have referenced it in an early point. It was the same clinical manifestations as a person overdosing. So I think a lot of these things that he faked were to cover up something else that was going on. Again, I didn't know this, and I can't reference it, but it was also a point of motivating people that he worked so hard that his body was being torn down. I mean, that was the other person who maybe might have not worked so hard in this committee or in this crew, that if the leader was working this hard and if he was having illnesses and still worked through it, then another person could pick up their piece. I don't think it was that complicated. I mean, I've seen it done in workforces today.
Did you like it at Jonestown? Some people loved it. We're talking a lot of people. Some people loved it. Some people hated it.
I didn't like Jonestown. I mean, I didn't like being out in the jungle and living with not the amenities of even Georgetown. Did that mean I didn't love Jonestown's concept? Well, yeah, I loved it. I thought I was a part of building a new world. I mean, we were the largest installations of citizens outside the armed forces and outside the United States. You talk about making a difference. I was a part of that. Did I love Jonestown? I thought it was necessary. I thought it was a necessary place. Did I love the community of Jonestown? Some of the interactions I had in Jonestown? Yeah, I love that. And I miss it. I miss being in a tropical rainstorm with your buddies sitting on the porch and just talking about anything and everything. I miss watching people being on the slippery paths and slipping and having to go back to take a shower because they came out of the shower, the communal shower. Yeah, I mean, I love that. Did I love Jonestown and being out in the jungle? No. It wasn't me.
But just to clarify, I mean, because some people talk about, how awful it was, that it was terrible and da-da-da, but were there people there who liked it?
Yeah, a lot of people. Well, you gotta look at a lot of people that were there, especially elderly people. They came from the South. So they were going back home with the climate. A lot of the older black people, if you look at the statistics of African Americans that were there specifically, and the majority of them were African American, the highest majority were older African American people who came from the South. So their climate and the attitude and the food was very similar to the South. People who didn't like it, I would say, were the majority of Caucasians, because they had to give up the most luxury. They had never lived in the South. They had not lived on that type of food. So when you listen to the complainers of how much they hated it, I think their skin's lighter than the shade of cream, a cup of coffee. Was it oppressive? When you're building the whole new world that's 7 miles wide and 12 miles long, that is so thick that Tarzan can't swing through, it's hard work. Did people realize what type of commitment they were going to make? I think the ones who wanted to make a new world realized it, or if they didn't realize it, they bought into it. The ones who thought, this would be a River Valley version of society had no clue. And I wish they would have left. I wish my father would have said, okay, go back.
But he didn't say that. People couldn't leave, is that true?
No, people couldn't leave. And I fault my father's lack of clarity on this. If people wanted to leave, he should have let them leave. He took it as a betrayal to the cause and to him personally.
It seems that that was kind of something that was part of your father's makeup.
Yeah.
Was that leaving was not allowed?
I think it was not. It was not allowed. People did. I mean, he wouldn't allow it, but he took it He took it as a personal affront. He had a real issue with separation. I mean, I think there's a clinical name for it, but people could not leave him. He couldn't wrap his mind around that. Personal affront could be one way of putting it. I think he just became dysfunctional with that concept, that people would want to leave him, leave the organization. He took it personal. I think if I look back at any one thing that he could have done differently, I think if that component would have been in his life, we might not have Jonestown. I mean, think about it. John Victor Stoen. If he could have given up that son, Grace Stoen wouldn't have created the turmoil, some of the turmoil. They wouldn't have had a vessel or a legal reason. I appreciate him not giving up his son. I'm a son too. I appreciate. Now, I believe that John Victor was a son. So, that's my opinion. I'm putting it out there.
Tell me that again, and why?
Well, I believe John Victor was a son. He looked like him. He looked like him more than his other biological son. I don't know. And he treated him like a son. So, looks like him more than his biological son, treats him like a son like me. Damn, makes him a son. For how many years old of his whole life did he treat him like a son? He was more of his son than anyone else's.
It's the only thing that makes sense to me. You know what I mean? I mean, if John Victor Stoen was not Jim Jones's son and Jim Jones knew it, then the whole thing doesn't make any sense at all.
That's my opinion. That's my opinion. I'm not saying that he wasn't Grace's son also, but it was also, in my opinion, I think he was Jim Jones's son. I know Grace had intimate relations with him. She's not denying that. No one's denying that. But does that matter? I mean, does that really matter in the whole scheme of things? What matters is that was a catalyst to all of this.
What do you mean?
Well, that was a legal catalyst.
What's that?
The legal catalyst to Jonestown, or the horrific event, was the John Victor Stoen issue. That was a legal catalyst. There wasn't really there were other catalysts of investigation, wrongdoings, or what have you, but that was a legal catalyst. Yeah, I'm not saying it wasn't right for anyone to come and claim their child or to work out some kind of custody settlement. I'm not saying that. But I can't fault Jim Jones for not giving up his son. I mean, he didn't give me up. Why would I expect him to give up another son? This makes sense to me.
I think that Grace now does say that she never had sexual relations with your father.
people tend to tell information based on what they can live with. We're all revisionists of history. We have to live. But why? I just have to, I put a question out there, and it's not a derogatory question, is why would John Victor Stoen always be in our household from the time he was born? Why would he, John Victor, I mean, I babysitted the kid on family vacations because I was the youngest and I kind of got took, you know, him and his other illegitimate son. He was a part of the family. He may have not had the length of time I had in the Jones family, but he was a part of the family. And I consider him my brother.
It's one of those things, once again, where, you know, what was truth, what was lies, what was real, what was false, you never...
Yeah, no, we'll never know. But to me, it doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter. To me, I think of John Victor Stoen as my brother.
One of the things that was talked about was the idea of this being this kind of, and you kind of touched on it, was this idea that people talk about this kind of being this perfect storm that happened all at once in Jonestown, is that, you know, that Jim Jones, your father's getting sicker, and his mental state is deteriorating. You know, the sons aren't there. That, you know, what was always preached was that the government, the media, and the concerned relatives were after you, and who comes down there but the government, the media, and the concerned relatives at the same time. There was all these forces that you know
lined up in synchrony that created this problem.
Right.
Well, let me first point out to you that for the 3 months prior to Jonestown, I wasn't in Jonestown, I was in Georgetown. I went into Georgetown in August of '78 to do public relations. I mean, it made sense. Black son in a black country named Jim Jones. I was being involved with I was being taught public relations and was planning actually to go to med school with my wife that January in Cuba. So a lot of deterioration that people talk about in the last 3 months prior to Jonestown, I didn't witness. So I can't give you a reference point off that. But when people talk about the things that Jim Jones was paranoid about and feared concerning relatives, media, and the government, them coming down to Jonestown and him asking all of his sons to come back. And we said no, because we met with Leo Ryan. Leo Ryan came in and met us at the encampment in Georgetown. He said he wanted to come down, see what was going on. We were like, I remember the radio conversation. Dad, let him in. You know, let him in, let him see what's going on. Because again, all of us believed that, you know, that Jonestown was a great place. What it was creating. It was really a utopia. Now, people remember it not that way. And I'm not saying it wasn't a hard world living in the community without the, you know, 7-Elevens and KFCs, you know, kind of stuff. But it was a beautiful community that people really grew and flourished in. So our attitude was like, let them come in, let them see what we see, or what we believe, rather, and let them go.
Let me ask you this can be really short because I don't think it's clear. So you talked to your father like the day before, 2 days before, on the radio, and you know, and told him they should let.
Yes.
Ryan. Just
yeah.
One second.
Let's wait for the train.
Well, let me answer. Let me point out two different things here. On November 6th, the U.S. ambassador to Guyana went out to Jonestown with me and other people from Georgetown to let Jim Jones know that the U.S. The Congressman Leo Ryan was coming. And my father said, wanted to argue it, but then my father still agreed to it. Days before, maybe the 16th or 15th of November, 2 or 3 days prior to the November 18th, when the horrific event occurred, my father asked the basketball team, who had 3 of his sons, also security members, to come back to Jonestown. And we said no, for 2 reasons. 1, we wanted to play basketball still. 2 was we had met with Leo Ryan because in the days that he came down, there was negotiation back and forth about him even being accepted into Jonestown. We had met with Leo Ryan, and we had told him that let him come in. He seems to be just wanting to find out about Jonestown. And again, all of us believed, at least I know I believed, that what Jonestown was a place that the congressman would go back and say, okay, this is not a bad place. This is a good place. So with that in mind, we did not go back to Jonestown, and we were supportive of Leo Ryan coming into it.
On 11/18, well, let me ask you something before that. No, on 11/18, you're actually played the basketball game on that day, right?
Yeah.
And then you guys, some go to the movie, some don't. And then what happened? You're on the radio. Tell me.
We had played the basketball the night before on November 17th, and then we had played another game on November 18th. Some people went to the movie. I think my brother Stephen, my brother Tim, and people I call my brother Johnny, Calvin, Mark. They all went to the movie, and some of us stayed at the house, the encampment. And we got a message from Jim, and he called me to the radio. He talked to Sharon Amos, who was the director of the encampment in Georgetown, and he talked to Sharon Amos, and he told Sharon, they brought me in the room, and he told me that, Jim, the avenging angels have come, and it's a white night, and we have to make a stand, and people will remember the stand in history, that we were not going to be oppressed or separated from our beliefs. Now, I took that as revolutionary suicide. I knew what that meant. I knew what white knight meant. And I remember arguing with him, asking him, is there something else we can do? Is there something else? I mean, why do we have to do this? And he got pretty angry over the radio. And that was the point to where I sent people to go get my brothers from the movie house. And when they came back, we were not able to get radio communication with them again. So we went over to where the concerned relatives were, and we tried to talk to them. We went to the U.S. Embassy, and we banged on their doors, trying to tell them that this is what's happening out there. Send us out there so we could stop it or we could help, and they wouldn't answer. About 3 o'clock that morning, after exhaustion had slept in, the Guyanese National Defense Force paraded or stormed into the encampment, put guns in our face, and filed us outside in undergarments and clothes and sleepwear, and basically told us what happened. And what I remember so significantly out of that night, and very interesting out of that night, was 2 people who actually survived Jonestown, actually were spared from the suicide, was Charles Gary and Mark Lane. And I remember them being kind of brought through to identify us. I've never figured out how or why, how they got out of there that night, but they did.
When you were on the radio,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you're on the radio with your dad. Were you asked to commit suicide
Yes.
and asked to be part of it?
Yes.
Talk a little bit.
Well, I mean, when he said that the avenging angels have come, and they said that this is a white knight, that was the code words for suicide. And that's when I argued with him. Is there another way? Is there why do we have to do this? And he didn't say that the congressman is shot, but he did again repeat that avenging angels have taken actions that we can't stop. The course has been set. So, and I interpreted that as mass suicide, as revolutionary suicide. And when my brothers and I went to see the concerned relatives or find them, Sharon Amos took her kids and our niece, Stephanie Jones, into the like this grand bathroom and slit their throats. And it wasn't for our good friend Calvin Douglas, who pulled Stephanie out of there, she would have been killed too, and still has a scar on her neck. So she followed the orders through.
Was your mother? Did you hear your mother on the phone? Because I know she was trying to stop it.
No, I've only heard the tapes of my mother.
Do you think that if you were there and your brothers were there, things might have changed?
That's a good question. If my brothers and I were there, would things would have changed? I think anytime you put another component in, you change the course. Would that have changed what would have happened? I don't know. I want to put it in perspective, I don't believe that we could have changed the complexity of the situation. Some of my brothers still feel that they would have changed it. I think they're overemphasizing their importance. The million-dollar question I have for myself that I always discuss is, if I was there, would I have drinking the poison? And if I say I wouldn't have, I am completely I'm not acknowledging why the individuals there drank it. And if I say that I did, that I would have drank the poison, I would have said that, I'm saying that why didn't I do it when I was told to anyway? So that's a question I can't answer, but I think that's how I feel.
One of the things is that I don't know if you've ever seen the NBC tapes of 11/17, where they welcome Congressman Ryan and they're singing, the band is playing Hearts of Fire, and everybody's and he says, some people say this is the best place they've ever lived. And people get up and cheer, and some people say that that so much of this was rehearsed, and there was a lot of rehearsal on some of the audio tapes. You hear Jim Jones rehearsing people, but I can't believe that this enthusiasm, for people for Jonestown was not real.
I think there was a deep enthusiasm for Jonestown. Yes, Jim Jones rehearsed things. He wanted to be prepared. But I feel that there was a deep enthusiasm for Jonestown. Jonestown represented an opportunity for a lot of people to live a life without the isms. It gave them the opportunity to really be a part of creating a utopia. Was that utopia not challenged? But I think the point that you really see in that, you see the people out there singing and really honestly rejoicing, was a lot of African Americans. And I think there was a big concept of difference between the African American community of Jonestown and the Caucasian community of Jonestown. And I think that's the real difference. And I think that's the real difference with People's Temple. If you look at today, the survivors of People's Temple is you don't see a lot of black people coming to talk to the media. You don't see a lot of black people coming to badmouth Jonestown. They just don't talk about it. But you see every white person lining up and want to tell you how bad it was.
Well, let's keep
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting?
Let's keep it back there. We're
Okay.
not gonna be able to-
Okay.
go there with this.
All right.
So you're saying then that at that time, in that 11/17, at those moments in Jonestown, that there was a division between how Jonestown was perceived by the black people.
Oh, I think so. I think so. I think so. I think, when you don't have anything, Jonestown, you own Jonestown. You are part of Jonestown. You were a shareholder at Jonestown if you were African American. If you were Caucasian, it was just stocks. You know what I mean? It was stocks. Like if it worked, if I got some dividend on it, then Jonestown was good. But if I had to work for it, oh man, this is not what I wanted. This wasn't why I signed up. I believe in integration, but I don't want to work for it. That's my honest opinion. I guess the question really goes, was there still, Jonestown wanted to represent no isms. I still think we had an ism there. I think we still had a separation. And that separation was based a lot on race because of people who really believed in Jonestown, a lot of people who were frustrated with Jonestown. And I think that line was more based on race than anything else.
What do you mean?
Mentioning the people who wanted to leave. I don't think there was one black person, but the people who were unhappy were people of non-color. I think when you look at the tape of the woman who fought with the relatives of leaving with the kids were mixed. That Caucasian woman who fought with her husband, they were mixed adopted kids. That was one of the few Caucasian people who fought that. Other than that, it was just really, when you look at it, at the moment of time, there really was a division. We look at the aspect of people who really were true believers.
The true believers were the black people?
Yeah.
So,
I think the true believers were the black people because they believed that they needed to have a difference in their life. They believed that Jim Jones created a difference. I'm not saying it wasn't contrite or manipulated, but I'm saying that Jim Jones did create a difference in their life. They gained more from Jonestown than their Caucasian counterpart.
When you were on the radio with Jim on 11/18 on November 18th, did you believe that this was real? I mean, what made you believe that it wasn't just another test, another fake?
It's interesting. When I recall those moments of that conversation, that last conversation with my father on the radio, I didn't think it was real. And maybe that's why I argued back, because it was like, okay, this is another drill. We had drills like this before, with test of loyalties, test of commitment, signs of faith. And to be completely honest, it wasn't until the body count came in that I realized that it actually happened.
I just want to go back. Let me ask you this. Well, anyway, do you ever have a dream, or was there a single dream that you had about Jonestown, about People's Temple, whatever?
Did I dream about Jonestown?
People's Temple after.
People's Temple? Yeah, dream about it a lot.
What was the dream that you remember? Just give me one dream.
When I used to badmouth People's Temple, I used to have dreams, or Jonestown. I used to have dreams of running from my father. And when I came at peace with understanding that my father had two sides to him, the loving father that I knew and that I loved, and the person who created this horrific event, I stopped having that dream. Because I think what it did for me was understand that there is a difference. You can still love a person and forgive him for what he did. And also acknowledge the fact that what he did was so horrific that it changed your life.